Awesome. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. So we'll still have some others join, but to set the stage today, I will be your moderator. So I'm Genevieve Easterling. I've spent my career in customer experience in some facet or another, starting in nonprofit and then for the last decade in the tech space. So currently I lead customer success at Guide CX. We're an onboarding and project management software really focused on how you improve that customer experience through engagement. You can find me on LinkedIn if you'd like to connect. And then I'm going to go over just a couple of pieces of housekeeping items before I turn the time over to Rob. So we had a record-breaking number of registrations, which is fantastic. It tells me one thing: you've all experienced in some vein or another customer escalations due to requests for products outside of their scope, may not be offered by your company, or maybe you're not yet available, something that's on the roadmap. So Rob will lead our discussion and introduce tips and tricks to de-escalate in order to maintain and ultimately strengthen those customer relationships. And because we expect this to be a really lively topic for you, from a housekeeping standpoint, we'll do a couple of things. So one, you are able to raise your hand and I can actually take folks off mute so we can discuss live. If you prefer, you can also use the chat and Q&A functions. I will monitor those from my side and make sure that we get to address as many questions and comments as possible. So from there, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Rob. So I'm thrilled to introduce Rob Zambito. Rob is the founder and CEO of Success Scaled. His passion for the customer success space is pretty unmatched and very contagious. So I'm excited for you to all learn from him. I'm thrilled to introduce you. Rob, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Can you all see my screen here?
We got it.
Cool. Nice. Awesome. Yeah, so for those of you who don't know me, I saw some familiar names in the chat, so I appreciate you guys for showing up. But for those of you who don't know me, my name is Rob Zambito. I'm a three-time customer success leader. In my history, built and scaled 3 different customer success teams, mostly from scratch. That's kind of like the specialty of mine, I suppose, as much of a masochist as that makes me. I'm here to talk to you about a topic that is near and dear to my heart, although I never thought I'd be saying that, because this is one of the most challenging topics I've had to deal with in customer success, which is the art of de-escalation. And I call it the art of de-escalation because, to me, de-escalating an angry customer is, honestly, it's more art than science a lot of the time. But at the same time, there's a lot of formulas, playbooks, tips and tricks that we can share with you so that you leave here with some really practical strategies that you can use in your calls even later today with your angriest customers to talk them down a little bit. I tend to say this is the least sexy topic in customer success, but evidently the attendance here is proving me wrong. So I definitely do want everyone to like light up the chat, come off mute. I want this to be as much a group therapy session as it is me talking. But I'll just kick things off. So one of the reasons why this is important, or if we stop to think about like why are you guys here, right? Why is this topic even important? There are a lot of reasons why de-escalating angry customers is important. Now, my school of thought has always been that customer success in the modern era should be built as a proactive revenue generating function. And I hear it all the time. Every time I'm on LinkedIn, I see people saying like customer success should be a strategic function, a revenue function. And there's so many of these big questions around customer success owning revenue. And if you just take that and say, all right, cool, that's what our identity is, then you realize that an escalated customer threatens every path to revenue that we in customer success have. It threatens the likelihood of retention. It threatens the likelihood of upsell and cross-sell. It threatens the likelihood of customer advocacy. Or even if you're the type of customer success team that's dealing with all these health metrics around NPS, time to value, usage metrics, or even go a step further back, you're dealing with support type metrics like first response time or resolution time on tickets. Whatever your manifestation is in customer success, you've probably gotten your butt kicked by an angry customer every once in a while. And so that's what we're here to talk about. I just wanted to kind of give some broader context on why this is such an important topic for not just you all, but for the whole organization that you're a part of, and frankly, the dollars and cents that show up on your company's balance sheet at the end of the day. So a quick backstory on me. These are just some logos of companies I've worked with. I've spent the last 10 years in customer success, although my entire career has been in customer success. Well, rather in customer facing roles since I was, a diner waiter when I was 18 years old. And I feel like, one of my first interactions with an escalated customer was this guy who he came up to the register when I was standing there, and he was like, "Why are your muffins so expensive?" And I was like, "Well, sir, they're gluten free." And he's like, "So you took something out and you're charging me more for it. Put it back, put the gluten back, and charge me a normal price." And I was like, "I can't do that, sir. I can't put the gluten back." But yeah, so escalations come up in tons of manifestations of of any customer facing role. And I like to joke too that I actually got my background in de-escalation from an even younger age, being a middle child in an Italian family. That'll do it for you. But um, but really, so across all these different companies, the interesting thing is that I've seen over 20 plus companies, a lot of themes of how and why customers escalate, how their expectations differ from reality, and why they get so angry. So you all have probably seen your own manifestations of this in your own line of work. And so I want you to think about, as we transition, okay, what is an example that comes to mind when I think of an angry customer? And what was my experience of that? What was the customer's experience of that? So if I do my job here today, I wouldn't be in customer success if I wasn't thinking about, your outcomes. My goal is for you to leave this session with a playbook that you can take for not only turning customers from their angry state into actionable product feedback, but also maybe you even leave here with like some tips on life in general. I think the best feedback I've gotten on this presentation in the past is that people find that they use these techniques when they're talking with their relatives around the Thanksgiving table and stuff like that. So timely, I suppose. So when I said, all right, think about a time where you've had to deal with an angry customer. I want you to just kind of hold that thought in your head and apply that. But what I wanted to do is just kind of start things off a bit interactively. If you can in the chat, please, just comment yes or no as to whether you agree that the customer is always right.
I love this one, Rob. Actually, this is an interview question for me when I'm bringing on new CSMs.
Wow, we got lights out, almost lights out no's. Not 100% all the time, sometimes. Sometimes is a no, right? Because sometimes the customer is always right is a no. It's nuanced. Yeah, interesting.
I'm trying to see,
Yeah.
trying to look back if the yes with an asterisk is a correct earlier one, or if the asterisk is just not noted.
So, look, I've gone back and forth on this. What I will say is that the customer does always have sort of the power of the purse, so they can always make the decision as to whether you're right or not, essentially. So they are sort of judge and jury as to whether they are right. But what I will say is, like, everyone who's had any interaction with a product team or has worked in product management functions knows the Henry Ford quote that if you ask people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. So, like, I think my reasoning for why I would say no to this would be that we in customer success or whatever other functions, where even folks in sales and product, like whoever's here, it's on us to educate the customer on what is right. And so the customer, by that logic, is not always right because it's on us to tell the customer what's right. And so as I think about this, I think interdepartmentally, I think about, like, who here has had tense relationships with their sales team because their sales team has overpromised on something that they're not able to deliver. And then that's the source of their escalation. or tense relationships with their product team because the product team is saying, well, you're giving this junk feedback about how this button needs to move and how this needs to change color and how this nav bar needs to move there. And we don't understand the why behind what the customer. I'm seeing a lot of I like preach in the
A lot
chat.
of agreement here.
A lot of agreement. Look, so that's the interesting thing is that the customer escalation is not just between you and the customer, it's between you and other departments. And that's one of the reasons why it's like so difficult for us in customer success to mediate those relationships. One of the CSMs that I worked with in the past, he said, look, I think it is criminal that I'm expected to deliver on the product promises that somebody else made. And I was like, well, man, you're probably in the wrong line of work. But I had another CSM that I worked with. He was like, look, I get it. Like, I'm the face of the customer to the company, and I'm the face of the company to the customer. So there are different ways to reconcile that. I just want a quick yes and no of like who here feels like they want to negotiate, or sorry, improve their negotiation skills. See a lot of yes.
I'm gonna vote yes, always more.
Some of the folks here might know some of the work by Chris Voss, who is a negotiation expert, former hostage negotiator for the FBI. Look, I'm not so fancy to say that I have anything close to those credentials, nor that all of his principles apply when we're just, frankly, just talking to angry customers. But I will say that there are a lot of principles that if you've studied any of his work, and I would recommend it, if you studied any of his work, you'll notice that influences a lot of the topics that we covered today. The last one just goes kind of without saying. Like I tend to ask people if you've seen this hashtag before, and you can put a yes or a no in the chat. But honestly, I know the answer is yes for everyone who's logged into LinkedIn within the last couple of years. Fact of the matter is, there is a importance to this topic because I'll put it this way. If you're in customer success, there has never been a harder time that I know of to be in customer success than the last couple of years. And if you're struggling because you're feeling like a punching bag and you're being told, well, just do more with less and pick yourself up by your bootstraps, like, you're not alone. You're in a community of people who are dealing with the same thing, and escalated customers do not make it any better. But at the same time, every time you are able to de-escalate an angry customer and retain that customer, you've proven your financial worth to the business in a way that may not otherwise get noticed. And so I think that there's layers to why this is important as part of the overall ecosystem of what's happening in customer success. So the way that I normally do this topic, there's actually 3 different topics that we can go through, and we're only really going to have time for the first one. I will just say, if you're interested in, well, so the first one is an exercise where we discuss how to handle feature requests from angry clients. The other 2 is just more broadly, how do you de-escalate angry customers in general? And the third one is then how do you convert angry customer feedback into really practical product feedback that the product team is able to action on and provide you with really clear timelines, as they always do, on when what the release dates would be for certain features that you're relaying internally. So the reason why we focus on the first one, handling feature requests, is there are many different manifestations of why customers escalate, right? A customer can escalate because they stubbed their toe or because they slipped on ice in the morning and they hurt themselves or something like that. But handling feature requests is like a great microcosm of that we can look at. And the really exciting thing about what you get to do in the audience, some of you, I think, have seen this before, is you get to play the role of being my manager. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through my actual career path, starting a decade ago, and go through the phases of where I have made big mistakes in the past. So you get to provide me feedback. Pretend you're my manager and provide me feedback on what I'm doing wrong. So if I helicopter dropped you into an exact situation I was in 2016, I had the attitude the customer is always right. And I said yes to everything. And that was partly because I was dealing with intense imposter syndrome. I didn't know the product, I didn't know the industry, I didn't know anything about SaaS. Why is this incorrect? So please put your answers in the chat. Again, imagine you're my manager. You see me just saying, yeah, that sounds good. That sounds good. We'll do that. We'll do that. Like acquiescing to everything the customer demands.
Okay.
So we've got it's not
Oh,
scalable, incorrect
incorrect
expectations.
expectations. Sorry, Rob, I don't want to read over you.
No, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, false promises, setting the wrong expectations, causes work overload and you're going to burn out. You won't be able to deliver on everything. It's not sustainable, negative impact to other customers. You set up the customer to be disappointed, promises on behalf of other people, paint yourself into a corner. Oh, I really like that one. It's not realistic, it's out of scope, it's disruptive, lacks confidence. You're able to make a mistake with the company's product. You shouldn't lie. I like the honesty is not only the right thing to do, but it's more efficient. If you don't deliver, they're going to churn, deteriorates trust with the customer, can't deliver, it's unethical. You're speaking for other departments. I think there's a lot of common themes here. You're
Yeah,
overlooking the root cause.
I
No,
like the can ruin reputation one. That's a good extrapolation.
I like this last one. Customers catch on when you're a yes man.
I think so. I think one of the favorite ones that I'll cherry pick here is looks like Nick said you're speaking for other departments without knowing their priorities, which can't be delivered on. And that is super interesting because remember I said customer success, we're in this weird position where it's like we're expected to deliver on the promises that somebody else made. Well, a lot of times we don't stop to realize that we're also doing that for our product teams. The product team that I've talked to product managers who are like, you mean I'm supposed to deliver on these promises the customer success team made? And then the customer success team's like, well, we got that from sales. So like, we can't help with that. So it's very interesting. Look, I realize this is like almost pedantic, bringing this up, why it's like silly to say yes to everything, but I didn't know that when I was new to my career in customer success. So the feedback I got, I remember I got reprimanded by my CEO, gave me a little timeout. And he said to me at the time, look, it's totally fair to want to say yes. And he said, feedback is good, but feature requests are bad. So if you feel free, if you want, feel free to chime in on the chat on what that means. Like feedback is good, but feature requests are bad. Like, how does that make sense? I imagine people are typing. I could extend it to say feedback is good, but feature demands are bad. Many feature requests suggest the customer will struggle to reach time to value. True. Feature requests imply commitment to doing. Feedback is not. You need to understand the need behind the request. Excellent. I love that. I'll let some more answers trickle in while I also share that, look, at this phase in my career, I had some really hard learnings. I ended up writing up something that I called the 4 costs of feature requests. So feature requests, to me, I realized that they had these huge costs. It was not just the simple cost to engineering, which seemed to be obvious, but I realized there was a cost to me personally, where I was staying up till midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m., 3 a.m., tracking feature requests, following up for updates, which I would have totally benefited from just saying no from the get-go, and finding a way to educate the customer that they were not correct. The other irony that I found is that here I thought I was doing the customer a favor, and there actually was a severe cost to the broader customer base. That if for every feature request where I acquiesced, I remember, for example, there was a feature request where a customer was like, can't you just add a toggle? And I'm sure people in the audience here have heard this before. Can't you just, and I'm like, no, like, I know you're going to go somewhere that I don't want you to go when you say, can you just, or can't you just? Because what I realized is that that for every customer where we acquiesced and we caved to the request, there was a net negative effect for the rest of the customer base. And it made my onboarding calls way more difficult because I then had to explain this toggle to every customer that I onboarded. And I would even go so far as to say, like, you know what, please just ignore this toggle, pretend it's not there, don't look at it. It has nothing to do with you and your use case. And in the worst case scenario, another company I worked at, we shot ourselves in the foot because we caved to so many feature requests that we destroyed our ability to build a product-led growth motion. The whole admin screen within our product was unusable by new customers because I swear to God, there was a checkbox that said escalate. And I asked the CTO, I was like, so what does this button do? He was like, oh, that doesn't do anything. You can click that, unclick that, doesn't do anything. I scroll down the page and I was like, there's another checkbox that says escalate. And I was like, wait, so what does this one do? And he's like, oh, don't touch that one. And I'm like, wait, this makes no sense. Like I was like, why did we build this stuff? And he's like, well, frankly, I don't know. It was for a customer early on, and I don't really remember the use case. But so there's a severe cost to that where like other customers can't use the product if we acquiesce to their feature requests. So there's this like almost sacred territory that is the product, and we want to keep it really clean. And then the last thing I'd mention too, I've had some smart CEOs really tell me, look, it's not just the feature request that is the problem and the cost of engineering time, but it's the opportunity cost of the other stuff they could be working on. Because for every customer where we acquiesce and we cave to their asking for us to move this button and change that color, that might take 1 hour of the engineer's time, but that 1 hour could be spent building industry changing functionality. And the opportunity cost of that could be millions of dollars in ARR for our company. So I had a crash course. Like I was having some severe identity crises about my role in customer success at this phase. And the funny thing was the CEO told me at the time, he said, look, the product is perfect. And I was like, dude, I don't know what product you're talking about, but it is not this product because this product does not work. This was all like, early stages, first few customers, finding product market fit. And he's like, the product's perfect. Okay, if you say so, I'll pretend. So I'll pause there. I'll take a quick peek at the chat here. Any interesting feedback we've gotten from my managers in the room who have now thrown many tomatoes at me?
I think there's a lot of good stuff in here, just about feedback being general two-way. I think this is maybe the biggest draw that I have is understanding. And I think that typically CSMs do a really great job of understanding and asking questions to figure out like where really is the pain until they get low on bandwidth. Do you have any advice for how to manage that, how to reset your customer success managers and make sure that they pause?
Yeah, we're going to cover that, I believe, in our next slide. So,
Rob leading. Rob.
yeah, perfect timing. So basically, like, I burned myself out. And so because I burned myself out, getting pressure not just from the customer, but also from my management, then I was like, okay, let me take on a new paradigm where my job is, I had this realization. I was like, a feature request is a negotiation. The customer is negotiating. They're threatening churn, right? So they have some leverage. And I was like, let me adopt this negotiation paradigm. That was when I started studying negotiations. And I was especially, I adopted this paradigm when I actually moved into a really terrible apartment. I moved for a work trip, for a 6-month work trip, and I moved to a terrible apartment. And I remember there was like stuff like the the stove had no knobs and the refrigerator had no shelves. And I asked the landlord, I was like, can we like just get basics like stove, knobs on the stove and like shelves in the fridge? And he was like, look, man, the place just comes as is. And at that point, like he'd already taken my money, and I was like, you know what? I'll work with it. And so I like bought pliers so I could turn on the stove and stuff like this. And look, I know I'm not recommending you live on 6th Street in Austin. That was an accident on my part. I don't know where I was moving to, but the point was, the interesting thing was like I heard this line. I was like, how did he have the gall to say to me, like like it comes as is? And so the next day at work, I tried that. I remember I had this angry customer who was like, he was demanding a certain change to our reporting section. And I was just like, I paused and I was like, look, man, the product just comes as is. And I was like biting my finger because I was like, I can't believe I just said that. And he said, okay. I was like, what do you mean, okay? He's like, all right, cool. We'll just deal with it. It's fine. It's better than the last thing we were using. And I was like, oh, wow, that was interesting. So I learned like some really interesting, valuable lessons there that, look, I'm not recommending this approach. It's a bad approach, terrible service. But there is some value in knowing that, first of all, find you can find ways to sort of like sit with silence and to set your standard with customers without saying yes to everything. Um, and there are some other mistakes I made here too. Like I learned that I remember one of the bad negotiation tactics I tried was telling customers, we've never heard this before. This is you're the only customer asking for this. That was stupid. You could probably imagine why. And again, you can feel free to chime in on the chat. But like, if you tell the customer, like, look, you're the only person asking for this, they don't reach the conclusion like, oh, well, I guess I'm a special unicorn and I'll just relinquish my request. They reach the conclusion that I guess we're not a good fit for you. We're not really your ideal customer. And they move on. Another bad example, this is so funny. Like, I remember I worked with a CEO once. He had this really angry customer demanding a certain feature, escalated to our CEO, and our CEO was like, oh, interesting. Hey, did you hear we just fundraised? And the customer was like, no, and I don't care. Like, I don't care if you raise $30 million. Like, it's no big deal to me.
Unless it's immediately going to fulfill my product request.
You got it. Exactly. Yeah. So basically here I was, and now I'm going to turn this back to you as being my managers here. So here I was, I made the mistake. I went too far in both directions. I went from being a doormat to being like too difficult with our customers. And I was like, I have to find the middle ground. And I want you to wear this manager hat again and tear apart this template. So what I did was I would email big companies. I remember my CEO at the time, he was like, pretend we're like a big company like Salesforce or Google. How would they deal with feature requests from angry customers? And I was like, well, let's find out. So I emailed feature requests to companies like Salesforce and Google and a bunch of others. And I just cobbled together what they told me. If you ask Salesforce to move some buttons and change some colors, trust me, they're not doing it. So basically what they said to me was, thanks for reaching out. Happy to help. And again, please critique this. Like, I want to see feedback if you're my manager and I'm using this template, like critique this, put your feedback in the chat. So what I started to say to customers was, at the moment, our platform does not support the functionality exactly as you're requesting. That said, I do see where you're coming from, and I can send this request to my team for the next round of product reviews. Feature requests like this often take time to review, build, and implement properly. So I don't have an exact timeline as to if or when it would be available, but I can reach out and provide you with an update if the request is accepted and progresses. It's my job here, my solemn duty, so supposedly, to see that your needs are met given the current functionality as originally purchased, wink, wink. So if you'd like to share any more details about your goals here, let me know and I'd be happy to help. Thank you. So let's see. So Giddy said you need to be firm, but still show that you're open to suggestions. Tell me like what's good and bad in this template? Because there's a mixed bag here. I'm sure that, and by the way, I wrote this prior to ChatGPT's existence. So, but it sounds like ChatGPT wrote it. This is way back in the day.
All right, we're getting some responses rolling in. Customer doesn't feel important. The customer probably thinks you're not being honest. Saying it takes time is asking for the customer to keep following up and having to disappoint. The response feels generic.
Because it is.
Yes, it is. I'd omit anything related to a timeline. It suggests that the feature will be implemented and at some point in time when it may not be. Jill just wants to hear your advice. She wants you to be your own manager here. I like that. You're committing to the feature. Do we even know what the goals, customers, outcomes are? Preach, Sandy, preach.
Great question.
Not sure you should take responsibility for following the request through to implementation.
Right.
Felicia adds, I'd like to talk about possible workarounds in the short term.
Felicia, I'm gonna come back to that. I promise. It's almost as if everybody here has had the same experiences.
Will you actually be able to reach out? That's tough if you're not going to give them a ticket or some way to check in. I think this is so common.
Yeah, good question.
Stop falling on your sword.
So I'll say this. There are a few things that young Rob was doing here that I think were smart. Smart, but not strategic. So I think it was good that the email is clear, that it shows some understanding of the customer, seemingly, right? It at least attempts to, and that it states my role in the company. Like, hey, look, at the end of the day, I don't totally have the ability to make this decision. What I don't like is it's dismissive. It's very templated. And at this time in my career, I thought this was a win. I like remember I had this angry customer who called our support line and he was like, I feel like you guys are just like an automated system. It's like, and I thought this was a compliment because I was like trying to automate customer success and support in this case. And I was like, I was so tempted to respond to him and be like, para español, lo primero dos. Like just to mess with him. Very templated. I think the problem was also that, it puts the onus on me to follow up, which was dumb because I was not going to follow up. I was really busy. But the biggest thing that I saw in the comments that's correct is that I'm not getting to why. I'm not getting to the customer's intended outcomes. I'm not figuring out the deeper pain point and the deeper reason why the customer is asking for what they're asking for, which turns out that's what my product team needed, a very pain-centric statement of why the customer was asking for what they were asking for. So we're going to come back to that when we wrap up at the tail end. But here I was, I thought I was like, doing this jujitsu, like the as per my last email jujitsu. And I thought I was like top of the world until I started seeing some customers become non-responsive. And then those non-responsive customers start to churn. And so like, okay, so I need to like find more ways to engage customers. The last phase that you all are going to totally roast me on as my managers and as my peers and as whatever you are to me is this example where, look, I don't know a lot. I don't know anything about MMA, but I do know that a submission is when you put someone essentially in so much pain that they cave, that they give up. So I was like, if I don't cave, the customer is going to cave, right? Or if I cave, basically I figured my goal was like to put the customer in this state where they would finally give up. And this customer was interesting. So these are real emails that I've used, and this is a real email. This customer refused to talk to me over the phone. They only talked over email. So I happen to have it fully documented. And I modified some stuff just to take out any company specific data. But basically, I told the customer, look, they were demanding this. I think it was that they were demanding a lot of features and functions, but I think in this case it was that that tasks turn red or something like that when they're overdue. So I was like, okay, I understand you here. You're trying to do X because Y. It makes a lot of sense to me. I feel the same in your shoes. This is me after reading like EQ for Dummies or something like that. And then I'm like, you know what? It's feedback like this that has helped us become the fastest growing player in our space. And it's like a little humble brag won't hurt. I think would help us get back on the same page if I share a perspective from our position. Is that all right with you? So at this point in my career, I was like learning that you can use permission-based approaches to get customers' attention, and I thought this was the right thing. So my next email, the customer, they're like, sure, fine, whatever, tell me what's up. I'm like, all right, well, let me just explain every little step we do when we process a feature request, because surely that'll make you empathetic to my position. So I was like, I know it may seem like this might be quick and simple, but under the hood, this is changes like this are really complex and delicate. We're transacting over 10% of the industry on our platform. Go us. Customer did not care. Each feature request has to go through all these phases. And I was on the verge of like making up phases at this point because I was like, customer deserves to know. And then, as if that wasn't enough, I just elaborated more and more and more and tried to position this to the customer's benefit. I'm like, look, these steps takes time, but that's why we're so great, because we're really careful. And I know it may seem ironic, and I'm your advocate here. And this is just like word vomit of customer success platitudes. We have to move forward in the meantime. There's something here that I'm going to come back to that's actually kind of good. I'd like to schedule a call to review alternatives we have in the meantime. By the way, coming back to Felicia, what you said, I learned at this point in my career that I was telling customers about workarounds, and I had a customer. He said, "I have had it with the workarounds. No more workarounds." And I was like, you know what? Alternatives. Alternatives. I don't have workarounds. I have alternatives. And he was like, all right, cool. It's much better. It's like, all right. So we have great alternatives, works for other customers. I hope this helps share a perspective. You have my commitment to advocate for you, so long as I have your commitment to move forward. So let's see in the comments again. Don't forget, you're my manager. What did I do correctly, and what did I do poorly here in your minds? Looks like some people are trying to come off mute, but
I see we're troubleshooting a technical issue with Zoom
yeah.
sound.
In the meantime, we'll use alternatives and use the chat.
Exactly.
No workarounds, but definitely pepper in the chat what you see that's good and bad here. What would you say to your customer, or what would you say to me if I was speaking to a customer this way? Obviously, too much empathy. That's a great point, actually. Too much info.
You made it about you, your excuses.
Totally. Dan, spot on. A lot of fluffy BS. Thanks, Felicia.
I don't care about your stats. People are leaning into really cutting you deep on this one. I like it.
Yeah, look, I'll say a few things. There's some clear and obvious mistakes here. Way too long. I also tended to train my team that if we were going to deliver bad news like this, do it on a call. Don't do it on an email. Because this took me like probably 45 minutes to write this email. And I thought I was I thought I had perfected it. I hit the return key and was so proud of myself. And you know what the response was? There was no response. I didn't get a response. Like the customer was like, you know what, man, I'm not going to read all that. Like that meme. It's like, yeah, I'm either happy for you or I'm sorry about that, but whatever. I'm not reading all that. There's interesting little wisdom that I used here. Like I did avoid the word but, and I've learned that if you could just train yourself to stop using the word but, it really helps in customer conversations. And replace it with words like so or and. I think it's good that there's a degree of reflection here. It's good that the email is permission based. It's not great that the whole humble brag thing I was trying to do here, not impressive. I wasn't impressing anyone. It is useful that I present myself as the customer's advocate, because a lot of times if we put ourselves in our customer's shoes, I don't know about you guys, but my customers did not know that I could not affect the code, that I couldn't actually change the product myself. They thought they were like, I was literally heard customers say like, you California boys and your coding, like, can't you just go open up the source code and change it? And I was like, A, I'm not a California boy. B, no, I can't. Do you even know what you're saying? Open up the source code and change it? Like that's not how software works. So it's good that I start to explain my limitations and then that I align incentives, but it's just really like it's it's too much. So what I learned to do is that I'm going to kind of wrap up this piece of the conversation around handling feature requests. And I want you to take this, steal this, use this. What I learned is that handling feature requests, again, it's an art, not a science. And you don't have to use every step in a 10-step formula that I'm going to share, but think of it like a cafeteria. You can go and pick a little bit of this and a little bit of that to use in different situations. But the main lessons I learned that, first of all, look, I had to challenge myself to show curiosity, not defensiveness. Because when I was busy and I was upset and I was angry, maybe hangry, like my immediate gut reaction was to tell customers no. And I know that doesn't sound terribly mature, but guess what? I wasn't always the most mature. And so I had to train myself to say, interesting, good question. That was like became muscle memory for me. And interestingly, that it then affected my behavior about being curious with the customer. Um, Appreciate the comment from Michael here, the Walt Whitman reference. The other thing I learned to do is to express gratitude as part of this narrative of growth. Like, look, I'm a better professional because of feedback that you share with me. And feedback like this is what has helped us grow. Like, that's a fine thing to say. You don't have to go so far as to say, like, look, guess what? We're transacting 10% of the industry on our platform. Like, but the third thing is that I realized this is interesting. This felt really counterintuitive to me that I had to prove to the customer that I understand and then go a step further, like by not just reflecting their needs and mirroring. Again, any Chris Voss fans here know a thing or two about mirroring. But that my job was not just to reflect back the need, but also expound on it. Take it to 3, 4, 5 different use cases that the customer didn't even mention. And that felt so counterintuitive to me. Why? Because I felt like I was increasing the likelihood that they were going to get mad at me. But what I would say is, look, if I'm hearing you correctly, you want the ability to blah blah blah. In this case, like have different logos by branch. And you want that because this, and you want that because that, and you want to provide a good client experience, and you want to provide a good vendor experience. You want to, and they're like, yes, thank you, you get me, and that was really hard for me. Um, so I would even dramatize the impact of that it would have on their business, um, without being able to promise anything. So I would capture all use cases. That's step 4 here. It's valuable not just because it makes the customer feel heard, but also because it reduces the chances that we build incorrectly. I don't know if anyone here has been in the position where you spend months building a product or feature or something that the customer is asking for. You turn around to the customer and you're like, here, look at what we did for you. And they're like, that's not at all what I asked for. And you're like, oh my God, like I can't believe I can't even go back to my team and tell them, guess what, we did it incorrectly, because that's going to fall on me. Not a good position to be in. So that's why number 5 is about a degree of informing the customer of the truth. Actually, in my kickoff scripts, and I've got like a ton of scripts and templates for this stuff. In my kickoff script, in my kickoff deck, we actually do a brief bit of customer education around how a software company works. And look, if you're selling to other SaaS companies, this may not be something you have to explain, but I come from industries where a lot of my clients, they like make software for scrap yards or security guard services companies or real estate companies or like companies that don't think about SaaS and product development. So that was a number 5 that you can pick from. And then real quick, again, feel free to screenshot this if you want. We'll share the deck and everything after. But real quick, look, I mentioned this. Provide real alternatives, avoiding workarounds. Try to also, this is an interesting one. This is where I get the feedback from sales teams. Like, why don't you just sell through it? And I'm like, do you have any idea what that means? We will share the recording. But what I did learn is that, look, there's actually a way to sell through feature requests by painting a big picture of the value propositions that the customer is getting from using your product as opposed to what they were using before. And in the best case scenarios, customers will say, look, I get it. It's not perfect. It's not exactly what I thought I bought, but I'll deal with it. And that's where I recommend, like I said, I have a lot of templates for this stuff, a concessions playbook. So you can also offer different concessions that make the customer whole without caving to their feature requests. I mean, I've saved customers literally by buying them lunch. And they're like, you know what? They're not going to do our feature requests, but they're pretty nice people. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. I don't recommend that as being your go-to strategy, but sometimes an Olive Garden gift card will go a long way. Last couple of things, look, conveying next steps, not promising a timeline, and then letting them know that we'll reach out when we have updates, which should ideally be in the form of release notes, is obviously fundamentals for most SaaS companies. And I think if you master all of these 10 tips and you pick and choose which ones to use where and when, then you can feel like this dude. Like when you get through all the, like I know not everybody here identifies as tech support, but to a lot of our customers, we are tech support, no matter if you're a CSM doing strategic success planning, or if you're on the support side, or if you're on the product side, or even the sales side, and you're account manager or AE or whatever. This is how I felt at the end of my journey. But I'll pause there briefly, and then we can wrap up on a couple final tips and principles.
Perfect. And then probably want to make sure we leave a few minutes per questions.
Yeah.
I've got a couple from the original registration, and this has been such a great participating group. I know we're going to have some more from our audience. I've got a couple on my side that came through that I'd love to ask about. One is, when is it better to give someone time to cool off and then respond versus continuing to reach out so the client knows that he or she is heard?
I would say most of the time. Well, so though that's a bit of a forced choice question, I think. I think there you can reach out in such a way as to buy yourself more time and simultaneously give the customer time to cool off. So they're not mutually exclusive, right? And so the schedule a call and set your Calendly or whatever calendar link you're using to be a couple days out is not always the worst thing in the world. But obviously, there's no one size fits all answer to that.
Yeah. I had a customer interaction recently that I really appreciated where things had gotten a little bit tense between us. And they ultimately wrote a note, and I responded with such that said, like, hey, I'm responding with this, but no, like, I'm still frustrated about this. It was actually really effective because I think what it did is told both of us, hey, we really care about the partnership, but we've gotten to a point where there's too much friction and we both need time to cool off so that we can continue the right way. So a ton of respect for that individual. I think I actually saw their name in the attendee list. And then the other
Cool.
question that I had that I think was really apt to some of the comments in here is, assuming that you work at a company that works with many segments of business, how do you manage maybe an SMB request compared to an enterprise one and set proper expectations?
I'll start by saying don't tell them where they are in your segmentation. that's that's probably an obvious faux pas, potential one. But so that is where I just want to give a quick preview for what some topics are that we could cover. If anybody wants to follow up, look, I care a lot about making sure that my mistakes turn into making everyone in my network better professionals. So I'm going to skip ahead. There's a bunch of other stuff we're not going to talk about today. But what I will say is that when it comes to advocating internally, there are templates that I use for like how to manage your CS product meetings. Also templates for how to submit feature requests from escalated customers and to convey that feedback. And that's a separate conversation that we can continue offline for anyone who's interested. So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn if you have some specific applications. Does that answer the question well enough, at least for the interim?
Yeah, I think it's a good start. And then I also see in the audience here, so we have Dan ask the question, has there ever been a point you've decided you can't support a customer because they demand feature sets that you can't deliver? And if so, how did you come to that conclusion? And I'm going to add on, what did you do with the customer?
Yeah, so I mean, short answer is many times. And there are times, so there's a range, right? There are highly important strategic accounts where we've made the decision that we're going to put our entire product roadmap on the back burner to prioritize this account. I remember there was the first enterprise client I ever signed, the company I was at, it was our whole company's first ever enterprise client. We had 12 engineers. Every one of our engineers was working on this one customer because it was that strategically important. That's like the one extreme. The other extreme is where you hear a CEO that you're working with or a C-level leader that you're working with say like, all right, let's just turn them if they're not a good fit. And that's like, I posted about this on LinkedIn yesterday. Like that's music to my ears when you hear this like liberating conversation that you can just turn a customer. It's so nice when you do that. The funny thing is too, sometimes they even come crawling back. Um, not to sound manipulative or anything like that, but there's an interesting there's the problem is most customers fit in the middle ground where it's super vague, and you need to have an internal conversation and make an internal decision about are we going to retain this customer? And that's a case of modeling, right? You're going to have to model this is how much effort and hours we anticipate would go into this customer. This is how much that effort, if I go back to that for cost slide, right? This is how much, this is what the opportunity cost of that effort is. This is how much also expenses associated with that effort. And here's the LTV of that customer, and here's where we're forecasting they're going to pay us over time. And then you can make an honest decision internally as to whether it's a good customer to save or to walk away from. But you'll notice that a lot of the negotiation strategies that I included in here, they mentioned the BATNA, the BATNA, best alternative to a negotiated agreement. That basically is like a calculus that's like, all right, what's our last, what are we willing to walk away from is the real question.
Yeah. Awesome. A couple more comments that have come through. I love Dave Allen posts. It says creating success plans with the client, not for the client. They can help de-escalate.
Yeah. Actually, here's a really interesting example. See this example, this pain-centric template for a feature request. I remember one time I was so burned out because this customer kept asking me for this and that and this and that. And I was like, you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna actually use today's session. We're gonna have you submit the feature request because our product team wants to hear it directly from you, not from me. I'm just, Joe Schmo to them, but they love you. And the customer, by the time they submitted, they had like 10 feature requests they wanted to submit. So we went through painstaking detail of them submitting every detail about the pain they were trying to solve for and the use cases. And by the end of it, they were like, man, this is hard. We should stop doing this. And I was like, you think? Like, that sounds good. Maybe we should actually stop submitting new feature requests. It was a very interesting case of CS jujitsu.
Yep, definitely. And then I want to maybe end on the question that I think we got a ton of response from immediately is, what do you do when maybe the wrong expectation was set by the sales side of the company?
Well, that would never happen. Why would that ever?
I
No,
mean,
I'm
I
just
actually feel really, really lucky. I feel very good about our teams. If any of my sales team is on, I feel blessed. But it happens. Or something was
totally.
purchased that maybe was no longer available once the
Yeah.
customer came on
No,
board.
this is I was being facetious, of course. You are very lucky to have one heck of a sales team. I'll say that. Um, but most of us in this room have been on the other side of that. And it's interesting. There's a whole separate training that I do around the 11 steps to a sales handoff. And really most of that is really about how do you deal with cases of oversell. Um, First thing I really realized is that like I couldn't just automatically blame the salesperson. That actually there's inherent informational misalignment between salespeople and their prospects, and not to mention all these incentives that help blow past those misalignments. Because I've never seen a customer who's got their credit card in hand, ready to make a purchase, and a salesperson who says, wait, but did you check out our reporting module? Did you check out the fact that we actually only have a web browser and not a mobile app? did you check it? Like, no salesperson's going to do that. So I had to first of all like kind of come to peace with myself. There's actually in the de-escalation section that we skipped over, there's a line in there um, that's about if it's an African proverb that I come back to often that says if there's no enemy outside, then the enemy if there's no enemy within, then the enemy outside can do us no harm. And I don't like thinking about work relationships as enemies. There's not enemy relationships. But what I realized is basically I had to come to peace with myself before I could then kind of de-escalate situations internally with my sales team and with the customer. The long and short of it, there's a lot to say there. We can go through my 11 steps to a sales handoff training, and it would be we'll find a lot of good learnings there. But unfortunately, I don't know that we have enough time for that.
Awesome. Well, Rob, thank you so much. Summer, I do want to acknowledge, I agree. I think it's easy to find fault. So Summer says, give the sales team the benefit of the doubt. I
Yeah.
agree. I think Gong or whatever recording software has been the great equalizer here in making us all accountable. And then yes, Jill, we'd love to do a second webinar on the topic. I think as Rob mentioned, we've probably got enough for 3 or 4 here. So either that or the great cheesecake bake-off, we'll have to decide. Thank you everyone so much. As Rob mentioned, we will send out the slides. We'll send out the recording of this. It was fantastic to have everyone. And please connect with Rob and myself on LinkedIn. We'd love to continue the conversation.
It was a
Thanks,
pleasure.
all.
Thanks, everyone.